Hello and welcome everybody to Rewind-A-Dynamite. My name is Ting. John Pollock is currently tied up with some family business tonight, but he will be back on Friday with me for Rewind a SmackDown. But in his place, very happy to welcome back to the show, Bruce Lord. What's up, Bruce?
I was just saying way before I got on that the FOMO was so damn real this past weekend, seeing all of the festivities from the 5-year post anniversary, getting to see everybody's tweets and videos and everything. Like all the other postmarks, I'm eagerly waiting the whatever recordings were made that happened to sneak out. I sort of feel like me, kind of showing up here on Dynamite a few days later on. It's kind of akin to like one of the guys who came in later on in like the invasion and alliance angle after everything was kind of over. It's like, it's 4 a.m, the party is dying down, and like, oh great, Brian Clark showed up. Whoopee doo. That's the spot I feel like I'm in tonight.
I mean, I would look at you as more as the Ric Flair, to step
Oh,
in after the end of the invasion. But you were missed, of course. But happy to have you on to get a bit of your presence and maybe some of your thoughts about AEW Full Gear as we talk about Dynamite.
mhm.
But if you feel like you've missed out, if anybody feels like they missed out, we're not going to have the full live Q&A up just yet, but we are going to have a bit of a sneak peek in the form of John Pollock's Road Diaries. So what John did was throughout the entire trip, he took out his audio recorder and just, recorded and documented in audio form the entire trip. So patrons are going to get that in their feeds sometime tomorrow. So look out for that. Also in the Post Wrestling Cafe, as we, do some house cleaning here, our latest edition of Rewind Away. John and I spoke at length about NWA TNA's episode 25, all the way from December of 2002. This was a request from our executive producer, Robbie Eleanor. And as you can see on your screens for people watching, a very young-faced AJ Styles as he took on the Amazing Red, a fantastic match. Also, I would say similarly faced Jeff Jarrett that you see in 2002, looking very similar to how you see Jeff Jarrett in 2022.
I mean,
Um,
if you were to ask me, which of all of the the people involved in that pay-per-view or show, which of them would be more likely to show up on on a primetime wrestling show 20 years later? If you gave me a choice between Jeff Jarrett and Amazing Red, you know, who are you going with? But maybe that's wishful thinking.
I think Jeff Jarrett will be here, forever, seemingly. But that was a lot of fun for me and John to talk about. So that is up right now for all patrons at postwrestlingcafe.com. Also for video patrons at video.postwrestling.com. So before we get into the Dynamite review, let's get into some news here, Bruce, while we have you. Some of our top stories of the day include the latest involving Cain Velasquez. Of course, those of you who listened to Rewind to Raw last week will know that Cain has been asking or did ask for permission to participate in a AAA event. And at this point, that has been officially granted and officially announced. Cain Velasquez has been granted permission to perform for AAA's card in Tempe, Arizona on December the 3rd. Velasquez, who is currently out on $1 million bail while facing an attempted murder charge and several gun charges, was granted permission on Tuesday to take part in the event. AAA has released a poster to advertise Velasquez teaming with Pagano and Blue Demon Jr. against Black Taurus, Sam Adonis, and Gringo Loco. Due to Velasquez not being required to have a GPS monitor, he has to hire a police officer for work details. So we're gonna get Cain, wrestling on the show. Do you have any thoughts or feelings about this particular story?
I mean, it's one of those things where I sort of feel like everybody is going to have kind of a variety of feelings that maybe go beyond what we might sort of say on paper we think should happen, or due process of the law and things like that. um like if you're asking me as a consumer, like, oh, how would I feel about attending a AAA show, or buying this show or anything like that? I mean, speaking personally, there are plenty of people actively working within wrestling right now, getting booked, that I'd be far more disturbed to see on a card than Cain Velasquez, which maybe says something about certain corners of the wrestling world. Um, obviously, I'm not a lawyer, but you have to imagine that this is a case where, barring something very, very strange happening, the case is going to go ahead, and Cain will have his day in court and whatnot. If he's posted bail, obviously, I'm not a lawyer. The fact that this is happening across state lines, if I'm remembering correctly, the the attempted murder and charges are filed in California. So the fact that this is happening in Arizona, I don't know if that enters into it, if it's a federal crime or not. Um, I'm not exactly sure what strings would have had to have been pulled. It seems like a pretty extraordinary thing. I mean, yeah, the fact that, as you're saying, there's going to be a legitimate police officer there supervising them. Think about how many pro wrestlers have come down to the ring with extra security or handlers to keep them from going crazy or whatever it might be. This man literally is going to go back to, face charges of attempted murder after finishing this pro wrestling match. Whether you think that is something that is going to just add to a real sense of kind of ghoulish sideshow spectacle to the card, or whether it adds some extra juice to it, I don't know. Your mileage is going to vary on it. Like I said, I'm not really going to fault anybody for feeling how they feel about this situation.
It's a pretty, unbelievable story and circumstance to, have a professional wrestling match take place in, and maybe that's as much as we can actually say about it. Um, I I interested in seeing the crowd response, to Cain, of course. I'm anticipating it to be pretty positive, just kind of given maybe how beloved he might have been prior to the of course charges even, but I think just kind of given the circumstance, it seems like he might have a lot of crowd support already, and I'm at least curious to see if the crowd response is what I think it will be. Let's move on to some ratings news here from Monday. WWE Raw. WWE Raw's Go Home edition before the Survivor Series resulted in a 7th place finish among its cable competitors. The show averaged 1,646,000 viewers and a .41 in the 18 to 49 demo as it trailed Monday's NFL programming and coverage of the World Cup soccer tournament. This comes to us, of course, courtesy from Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics and Showbuzz Daily. Raw's audience was nearly identical to last week, while the 18 to 49 audience fell by 7%, its lowest mark since Halloween. Over on NXT's results from Tuesday, NXT averaged 624,000 viewers and a .12 in the 18 to 49 demo. Also per Brandon Thurston and Showbuzz Daily, the show fell to number 50 among cable originals due to a 30% drop in its key demo audience, which was its lowest in the 18 to 49 category since June the 28th. Have you been keeping up with either brand, Bruce?
Oh, not in terms of watching them. Oh goodness, no. But in terms of listening to Brandon speak about these things, and of course your guys' reviews, yeah. I mean, it sounds to me, and again, Brandon's the one crunching the numbers on these things, that whatever sort of bump there might have been coming out of the whole change in power, and I imagine a lot of curiosity due to the palace intrigue of the whole Vince and Hunter situation. I kind of feel like that's died down, and if we're looking at talk or discussion about either main roster WWE or NXT for that matter, the only thing that people actively, at least in my circles, seem to be remotely interested in is just anything and everything related to the bloodline. And if that's happening on Fridays, Mondays are going to be kind of left out to dry a little bit there. So yeah, it's understandable why. I mean, this could just be sort of confirmation bias, right? People kind of wanting to look at these shows and sort of see, oh, these extra little differences and whatnot that are there. But after a while, those just sort of begin to be taken for granted. Oh, I've got fine. They're saying wrestler in hospital. What else have you got for me? And if you have some of the extended Baron Corbin match and things like that happening, it kind of turns into a bit of a meet the new boss, same as the old boss situation, I think.
Next week's, show after the Survivor Series will, you would expect to have, a pretty solid bump coming off of it, especially if there's any sort of surprise on the show. But this week seemed to be a bit more of the same from what we're used to. Our last story here is about Karl Anderson and the never-ending saga of the Never Openweight Championship, seemingly getting some resolution here as WWE wrestler Karl Anderson's return to New Japan Pro Wrestling has been officially announced. He will finally defend his Never Openweight Championship against Hikuleo on December the 14th at the Super Junior and World Tag League Finals. Luke Gallows is also set to appear on the show. First of all, thoughts on this entire saga, Bruce? Do you expect it to come to an end here? What do you think?
I mean, I have to imagine that we will finally just get an end to this. This has been going on for far, far too long. I mean, on the one hand, you can sort of look at this and say, hey, this was just a, probably a shoot scheduling error that then got turned into an angle and has now been built up. And look, we're still talking about it months after the fact, right? There's probably more attention being paid to a Hikuleo match than the guy has ever had in his life, or in his career, rather. The problem being, the rubber is still going to hit the road here. And look, as somebody who watches a lot of New Japan Strong, um, I'm not really sure what expectations people are going to have going into this match. But in it's one man's opinion, but Hikuleo is not really at the level of a lot of the other LA Dojo and Noge Dojo graduates and young lions of his class. Obviously, the look, the pedigree, the size. You at some point, you have to sort of let him out there and sink or swim. But this match becoming a lot more high profile than it might have otherwise been kind of puts him under the spotlight. And if we're going on recent history, the last match that Anderson had with Tanahashi of all people, he didn't really seem to want to turn the heat up for that. So I can't really see him being able to carry Hikuleo to an especially great or notable match here. So I imagine, relatively short, maybe a little bit of gimmickry, maybe a little bit of, of Gallows involvement that smooths things over a little bit. But like I said, I'm just glad this is going to be over.
I'm not so sure that's a sure thing, Bruce, because Fightful has released a report stating that they've spoken to people who believe that Carl Anderson is penciled in for the Tokyo Dome. So there's
All
a
right.
very good chance this continues. And, maybe part of the reason at least is perhaps the fact that Hikuleo might not be at the level that they want to, take the belt off of this prestigious
Mm.
champion and Carl Anderson. So there could be a chance that, Anderson retains. And if so, the chance that we may get a WWE, AEW Stardom involvement in the latest
Mm.
in the next Wrestle Kingdom here, which would be interesting. Have you been keeping up at all with the Super Junior tag tournament?
Yeah, yeah. I had a bit of a day to myself today. Not a lot in the way of day job work or whatever it is. So I got all caught up on Super Junior Tag League and World Tag League today. Um, it's not lighting my world on fire. It's the World Tag League has not really been the most high profile tournament for the last little while, and I'm not really sure that I can necessarily recommend any of the individual World Tag League matches. A few of the Super Junior Tag League matches have been pretty good. I think the last two matches on the first night, and then the last three matches on the third night are all probably worth checking out. Really, it's just what I've been getting out of this is just the enjoyment of having a little bit of extra kind of fresh flavor and new faces kind of back in the New Japan mix. You've got some returning people like Alex Zane, Ace Austin, Lindemann, who I think are contributing a lot. It's really cool to see Chris Bay in the mix. They're very much getting behind the LA Dojo guys. They're being presented as young lions no more and graduates and everything. So there's a little bit of something happening there. It's also always nice to check in with the young lions. Fujita's looking good. And if nothing else, the first two nights, it was really nice to hear cheering in a Korakuen show. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I think DDT maybe had cheering happening in one Korakuen show, but it was just nice to kind of have that back, that really old New Japan feel in that building again.
So that is the latest news here. You can find all of it, of course, at postwrestling.com. And with that, let's move on to tonight's edition of AEW Dynamite. AEW Dynamite coming to us from Chicago here. Bruce, first of all, your thoughts on Full Gear this week?
I really ended up enjoying it. The friends that I had over to my place to all watch it together, we were all a little bit maybe more Luke on it going in than we generally are for AEW pay-per-views. But it was always just okay. Well, we'll get out and hang out together. But between the Eddie and Jun Akiyama match, and then a really good cage match, which was a lot better than I think any of us were expecting it to be. We all really kind of got sucked in and ended up very much enjoying, pretty much almost all of the matches to a good degree. I thought that the Hayter Storm match was really good. Obviously, Bucks and Death Triangle was great, and they're obviously going to keep spitting that out for a while. Yeah, on the whole, a show that I thought really eclipsed expectations, some somewhat muted expectations going in. I don't know that we've gotten a confirmed number as far as the buy rate. I know Khan was intimating that it was kind of hovering around the 140-ish terrain in the post match or post show presser, which is a little fair bit higher than I was ballparking it, around 129, 130 or something. So whether that's just brand loyalty or whatever, but I think everybody who did show up for it or pay up for it ended up getting a pretty damn good show.
Yeah, certainly I think going into it, my expectations were a bit lower too, just, just given all the news. But for me, it was a show that it absolutely kind of like changed my perception and excitement for AEW, really like reignited it in many ways. So heading into tonight, I was excited to see a lot of the fresh direction and a lot of the fresh, like I was just excited to see the company move past, honestly, the entire CM Punk Elite thing.
Well, we'll get to that later on. But
Yes,
I
we
don't know if
will.
you noticed, but I don't know if you noticed the opening montage for this Dynamite was completely redone. All sorts of new faces, all sorts of footage from new champions crowned at Full Gear and whatnot.
I missed it because I tuned in a little bit late on my feed, and unfortunately, you can't rewind. So
Yeah.
please fill me in on any other things I may have missed. But I did catch William Regal in the ring here. He has come out now as a full-on heel. He says MJF won't be here tonight. MJF does not have the time to be in, what is this place? Chicago? Fuck you, Regal, chants are heard. Regal basically only says that weeks ago he sent an email to MJF, but he will not reveal the contents of this email, and he'll let MJF do it next week. Regal keeps promoting that MJF will be here next week, and the more he says next week, the more this crowd starts to boo him. At this point, Mox comes out, and Regal is caught in ring with the close-up of his classic Regal snarl. So good to see it return. Mox is about to make a beeline for Regal in the ring, but out comes Bryan Danielson to step in to hold Mox back. Danielson says, Regal did a bad thing, but so have you. And so have I. He's got a bad neck and 2 bleeds on his brain. Don't hurt him. Mox is pacing around the ring. He's struggling to keep himself together, and Bryan just slaps him in the face. Bryan says, sorry. He's kneeling at one point before he gets up and says, I'm sorry. My dad struggled with the same struggles you did, and the person who's helped me understand them was Regal. I was able to love my dad for the last years of his life because of Regal. Imagine someone teaching your daughter to understand your struggles. Save him for me because I love this man. At this point, Chicago is chanting bullshit. But before we get to the rest of the segment, your thoughts on Bryan Danielson's portion here?
I was expecting Bryan to sort of be running in and playing interference. It was the fact that Mox, somebody, I can't remember who it was, if it was Bix or somebody, pointed out on Twitter that immediately when he came to, Mox turned and looked at Danielson to sort of be like, what the hell just happened there? This is somewhat on you, or you're going to have to be the go-between here. So I was expecting Danielson to get involved. I was not necessarily expecting this whole sort of scene of fathers, both surrogate and deceased and present and absent, being introduced right out of the gate. A whole lot of psychodrama being brought up here. I think a lot of people maybe have memories of the very emotional press conference that Danielson gave after his father passed away. We know that, it came up, it was very much the kind of the sticky wicket in the Austin podcast, right? The issue of, Mox's relationship or lack thereof with his father being something that he doesn't want to talk about. So the fact that that was sort of the angle that was being worked here, very much sort of kind of heightened things beyond just, okay, why is he working with MJF, or what is the nature of his betrayal of us, and really brought up the history of both guys in an interesting way, if they are possibly transitioning away from having Regal involved in this storyline or even involved in the company, which there's obviously a lot of speculation about right now.
Mox is then gripping the ropes. He's shaking them, and he tells Bryan to get out of the way as he stands face to face with Regal. He says, your lordship, I only want one thing from you. I want you to run as far as away as you can, and you never come back. Walk and keep on walking. And so Regal walks up the ramp, and at this point, it almost looks like Mox is kind of struggling to like hold back tears from his eyes. I thought this was a tremendous segment. I thought Bryan possibly had the most substance in any dialogue we've heard from him throughout this entire AEW run.
Mm.
I think, one of my biggest complaints, I mean, he's been very good in ring, but like, I think part of the reason why people are complaining that he doesn't feel like he has as big of a presence as people like Punk did, or people in the upper mix, is because I don't know if he's had that much character sort of development at all, throughout this entire year plus in AEW.
I think he's the sort of guy who, if we're kind of taking his interviews kind of at his word recently about, being fine with not being in the main event mix or wanting to, sort of do ROH stuff or whatever it might be. I kind of get the sense that if he doesn't feel as though there is kind of a character angle to work, then he's fine to just sort of like, well, I'll just stand back and be the grizzled professional wrestler with an incredible, ROH pedigree and whatnot. And I don't need to get specific storylines about, I don't know, factions, my family, or recycling, or whatever else it happens to be. So yeah, he's very much been kind of kept, I wouldn't say on the sidelines, but certainly in a less high profile role than Moxley has. If this indicates that he's going to be stepping out of that, cool, great. It seems like a natural time to do so.
Yeah, and I think it's a necessary ingredient in professional wrestling, in getting somebody to care about your match. I mean, we care about his match anyway because he's Bryan Danielson, but to get somebody really invested in why you want to win, or why you want to save somebody from I don't know, attacking your father figure, it just makes you that much more invested in the actual outcome of the professional wrestling itself. So I thought he did absolutely great here. It was great to see Regal back as a heel, even briefly here. He's been such a great and effective babyface throughout this entire Blackpool Combat Club run, and even like dating back to his role in NXT. It's been so long since he's actually been a heel that you almost kind of forget that the guy made his career in this role. But Mox to me was just another sort of like MVP of this entire segment. Like, in his nonverbal acting, I thought was so good. The internal struggle that he showed as he was holding back from wanting to beat the shit out of this guy, and at the same time, like, feeling this intense betrayal from somebody he probably looked at as a father figure as well.
Well, I mean,
Without saying too many words, he I thought displayed it beautifully.
what do we remember about, the Rollins Shield breakup, right? It's the reaction that Mox has, turning to look at
Mm.
Seth, and then in the match that they had thereafter, just him basically weeping while beating Seth up and just yelling, "I loved you," right? That man
Mhm.
can sell betrayal and disappointment in his brothers, or in, people that he cares about, incredibly well. So obviously there isn't a match with Regal to go to in this case, fingers crossed. But in terms of it giving something for Mox without the belt to have to deal with or process,
Mhm.
even if I have to imagine the poor guy's getting his vacation at some point soon. So even if we don't necessarily go to an MJF rematch right off the bat, there's a lot for him to sort of play with here in
He's
the short to medium term.
He's got that fishing rod packed, I think, for like months now, and
Yeah.
maybe this means some sort of exit, but it didn't necessarily indicate it. It's
Mm.
not like he's like reeling from any sort of significant injury. Maybe he's heartbroken, but like it doesn't necessarily indicate that he'll be leaving at all. But to me, the Bryan Danielson sort of element of this is the most interesting coming off of tonight. I think it was not a mistake having him sort of be positioned, in frame behind Mox, so that you visually are going to start to wonder where his allegiances lie. Is it
Hmm.
to his teammate, or the person who he sees as a father figure in all of this? And
I
if he's turning heel, like, how is he going to work with MJF?
Yeah, and is Regal going to be there for it? I'm not sure how much stock you're placing in some of the kind of the scuttlebutt going around right now, or whether or not the fact that, Charlie
What is the
Dempsey.
scuttlebutt? Inform
Oh,
me.
well, oh, just that, we've got Charlie Dempsey debuting on NXT. We're going to be hitting a year of since Regal's debut, I believe, in March, with AEW. So contract status, who knows there. If you have, I mean, clearly, like, as everybody's been pointing out, right? Like, Hunter's just going through everyone that he might have had a conversation with in catering at some point in NXT. You have to imagine that that call has been made. And obviously, this is something that MJF has been playing with in terms of the bidding war of 2024 and whatnot. The fact that you have that alignment between MJF and Regal now, that is possibly something that either for real or in storyline we could be seeing played with for the next little while.
Very interesting. Up next, we've got Lee and Swerve backstage. They decide to talk about Lee's walkout at AEW Full Gear, and no more updates from there, but maybe something next week, it seems like. And then we've got for the All Atlantic Championship, Orange Cassidy versus Jake Hager and his purple hat. This hat gimmick, Bruce, it is over. Okay. The crowd loved it when we were there live in Newark, and they certainly loved it tonight. Jake Hager and his purple hat, and they essentially worked this entire match around the hat, Bruce. The best friends and the JS members are ringside. Hager is starting to wrestle with the hat on. At some point, the hat falls off, and it gets this. They milk the reaction just from this crowd with the both of them looking at the hat on the mat. Cassidy at this point grabs the hat and threatens to put it on, but Daniel Garcia from the apron grabs it and takes it away. Hager then catches a Cassidy tope suicida and rams him against the post and regains the hat, dominating through the commercial. Cassidy comes back with a stun dog millionaire and a tornado DDT. At this point, Hager locks in the ankle lock. As Cassidy up kicks to defend, he knocks Hager's hat off, which prompts Jake Hager to let go of the hold so that he can retrieve his hat. Cassidy then catches him with the quesadilla into a pitting combination for the victory. Your thoughts, Bruce? Is this hat? Are you down with this?
After going from a story about like fathers and surrogate fathers, which has echoes of like Eugene O'Neill and Dostoevsky, we go to something that seems to be clearly inspired by that classic of modern children's literature, I Want My Hat Back. I don't know if Oscar's probably a bit young for that right now, but in a couple of years, I'm sure it'll get over with him great. Um, I look, on paper, I was going to really dislike this. I'm one of those people who's feeling pretty burnt out on Cassidy right now. I just don't. Whatever. He's kind of run out of good grace with me, but that's an issue for another day. And I kind of feel like I dislike Hager's in-ring work even more than the average person does. So on paper, I was like, oh god. But when it was revealed that this is what it is, okay, fine. Like I'm glad it's at least being played for straight comedy. Hager's basically like King Hippo from Punch Out. Now you just wait for his clothes to fall off, and then he's vulnerable, and you just lean into him and take him down. Nothing to be really said in ring. We've just got constant JAS and best friends shenanigans going on. So whatever. I mean, if the hat is over, ride it for a couple of months, I guess. Sure, fine.
I sense I like this a lot more than you did, Bruce, and that's perfectly fine. But for me, like I've been enjoying this Orange Cassidy run a whole lot. I think the struggle has always been, this is an over gimmick. And gimmick is sort of like the main word here. Can you really flesh it out into a full on story and a title run and a substantial role for him? And I would say they've done a decent job by strictly focusing on his in-ring challenges. And ultimately what you're getting is a great wrestler, sort of like enveloped with this silly gimmick in Orange Cassidy. But I thought Jake Hager was almost like the perfect type of opponent with this new gimmick because it's just as cartoonish and it's just as silly, but it's on the other side. He plays this sort of like big goofy idiot with this like one Achilles heel in his hat that makes like, Orange Cassidy like the perfect cartoonish type of hero to try to vanquish him. It's made Hager certainly a lot more interesting, and as a mid-card gimmick, I actually like it a lot.
It's maybe a better fit for Cassidy than the Shibata business, in my opinion. So you're right. It's making the best out of two characters that I don't normally have a lot of interest in, and it wasn't pretending to be anything other than it wasn't. So yeah, no harm, no foul.
Up next in our World Title Eliminator tournament final. Wow, what a mouthful! World Title Eliminator tournament final here.
Do you want to talk about the return before then?
The return. Yes. Did I miss something here?
Yeah.
Of course.
The factory runs out, but that's a swerve.
The return of the factory. We've all been waiting for a week. No, QT Marshall and the factory come out to confront the best friends, but his mic gets cut off and the lights go out and out comes Julia Hart on the ramp. The lights come back on and it is the House of Black. They lay out the best friends as the factory applauds them from the apron, thinking that, the House of Black are here to help. They've joined the factory. The House of Black then attack the factory. A bunch of random wrestlers and security guards also come out. The House of Black just picks off everybody. Buddy Matthews and Brody King end it with a Dante's Inferno to a poor security guard right on the ramp. As Malachi says, members of the House of Black, please rise. Your thoughts on the return, Bruce?
Like you guys, I am often intrigued by the kind of tone and aesthetic of the House of Black and Malachi Black promos, but often, I'm not going to try to do John's impression of Malachi or anything like that. But when it gets a little too turned in on itself, things kind of begin to fall apart. But that being said, I really like the vignettes. The fact that they are clearly repositioning Julia in this, kind of pastel summer goth outfit, kind of as like the spiritual center of the group, I think is a really cool look. Like I said, the vignettes were good. It was time to get some physical presence here, and the fact that it interrupted a factory versus best friends, set up there. I'm like, oh god, I don't need any more of that on my primetime television. No, we're not getting any of that. We're getting a much more menacing stable returning. Yeah, no, on the whole, I thought this was pulled off pretty well. I don't know that feuding they'll spend much time feuding with the best friends, or what sort of matches in the short to medium we might be going towards. But some time off, I think, has kind of refreshed and reinvigorated this whole group. And again, I think Julia, they've done a really good job with positioning Julia in the role that she's in now.
Totally agreed. Yeah. I don't know if sort of like all these, reports of whether or not Buddy or Malachi would be returning to AEW might have contributed to it, but it almost got like it almost kind of turned them babyface already that way, because we were kind of teased with the idea of not having these guys around. So when it was, revealed that wasn't happening and that these guys were returning, immediately I think they were shooting up to become crowd favorites. And those videos I thought looked so cool, and Julia Hart's new look looks so absolutely cool that it's just like you can't help but just absolutely love it the moment you see her on the ramp. I thought they've done such a great job with her, really making her presence sort of integral to the whole presentation of it all. So, I thought they might have reintroduced these guys at the end of the trios match at Full Gear, but it's clear that, of course, Death Triangle and the Bucks are going to be feuding for quite a long time. So that's probably the match maybe you get to for the trios championship, maybe for the next pay-per-view.
Mm-hmm.
But until then, maybe a best friends feud will be their surrogate for now. All right, so that is that. And then up next, we've got for the World Title Eliminator Tournament Final, it is Ethan Page taking on Ricky Starks, the match that was supposed to take place on Saturday, but instead we had Starks beating Lance Archer in the semifinal, I believe. Yes. The winner of this match will face the champion at Winter is Coming in 3 weeks. Ricky Starks comes out, and his shoulder and his ribs are just taped up completely. He works the entire match with a big handicap here as Ethan Page works over the midsection through a commercial break. Starks is about to hit Page with the Tope Suicida, but Stokely pulls Page out of the way as Starks just goes flat on the mat. Starks then fights back with a superplex. He's doing the entire match essentially with his arm clutched to his chest here. The referee does a good job here, or sorry, the announcers, I should say, do a good job, I thought, of like verbalizing the pain of a rib injury, talking about how every kick out, it hurts a lot for Starks. We get another desperation spear from Starks, and then he sets up another spear, hits it. Ricky Starks gets the babyface victory. Your thoughts on the match, Bruce?
I really, really like this. I thought this was really a case of putting both guys in exactly the sort of role or position where they can excel. Starks has just such natural charisma. So even from the beginning, right, him striking his silhouette, but wincing a little bit, because his ribs are hurting when he's twisting his midsection or whatever. That the whole way through the match, there was a superplex spot where somehow, even from behind, he managed to sell a rib injury while doing a superplex with his back to the hard camera. I don't know how he did it, but he did that. So a really cool, like, kind of personality and perseverance based win for him. I like the fact, booking wise, that coming out of the matches with Archer and Cage, he's clearly beat up and beat down. So there's obviously, if you are keeping the belt on Moxley, there's a very easy story to tell in terms of Page taking advantage of a weakened opponent and still sort of preserving Starks's build over the last little while. But obviously, if we're going to Texas and MJF has the belt, Starks is the way to go here. I should also say that I think that this is really the sort of match that Ethan Page is really good at. I can take or leave Ethan Page a lot of the time, but when he's in this kind of slow, methodical, shit-talking heel role, like this is very similar to the role he played in his long-standing feud with Darby Allin, right? Just, punishing and trash talking a smaller, weakened opponent who is often clutching his midsection as he wings him around here and there. I don't always like Page when he's fighting kind of from beneath, stronger or upper card faces, but as just a bully picking on someone smaller or more beat down than he is, he's great in this. So I want to give him his credit as well.
Agreed. I thought it really showcased a very good, gutsy, classic babyface performance from Starks, and it takes somebody who can be as vicious as Ethan Page to kind of take it there. What do you see for Ethan Page coming off of this? Because of course he and Stokely and the firm were involved in the entire MJF. Is he a heel? Is he a babyface sort of drama? And coming off of Full Gear, it just kind of feels like they were just a complete non-factor in everything.
I don't know if we just completely scratch the firm, if we kind of rejigger the actual makeup of it. Obviously, Paige has been given a lot of mic time and ring time, and they seem interested in warming him up. Whether, I don't know, if you want to spin him off into a feud with Cassidy or something like that over the Atlantic belt, that's a possibility there. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, just to underline what you and John and so many other people have said, I think it would be a tremendous mistake to kind of regroup MJF with the firm, even after tripling down on the MJF heel turn, the optics of that beatdown that they delivered to him, and then that being pulled out from under you is just not really the sort of storytelling I don't think that people are expect at this point, or at least expect from AEW. So yeah, it's an outfit that's kind of at a crossroads. Individually, the individual pieces have found their own little moments to shine here and there. Obviously, the Guns with the Acclaimed business. Moriarty's had a couple of nice matches. I think even Morrissey has done okay as kind of just the big heater coming in here and there. But where that actually goes as a faction, I'm not really sure right now.
I think there's benefit to keeping them as a unit, just to be able to, I don't know, do occasional trios matches, have like, Morrissey play muscle to Ethan Page or something like that. But they certainly need something, because as a threat, they need some sort of follow-up to address the MJF thing, or MJF needs
Hmm.
to address them. And it's going to have to happen in a way that retains the both of them as heels, can also explain why MJF was attacked by them, without simply saying, "Oh, I let them beat me up just to trick Mox." It's going to have to fulfill a lot of those things, because if they don't address it, I just worry that they'll just kind of like linger in sort of like mid card irrelevancy. So
I'm wondering if the Regal story might be the key to that. If it comes out sort of that maybe MJF was sincere in his attempt to go straight, didn't want the firm to run in on Mox, did want to beat Mox on his own. But if Regal has been the devil on his shoulder, whispering in his ear and whatnot, then the fact that MJF was initially feuding with the firm before doubling down on the heel turn later on might make sense.
we get a video from Wardlow here, and he sends a message to Samoa Joe. So that feud is going to continue, presumably until Final Battle here. And then up next, we've got Jade Cargill, and they re-aired the confrontation that she had with Bow Wow at some sort of at the concert from Miami. um, and when asked to follow up on it, Jade Cargill simply has no comment. So I guess they're building up to an appearance from Bow Wow here in the future, but
Look, we've already had Bow Wow's two kind of, again, if we're talking about surrogate father figures, we've had Bow Wow's two surrogate father figures in
JD.
Jermaine Dupri and Snoop on AEW television. This
Whoa.
has to lead to a Snoop versus Jermaine Dupri fight for custody over the remainder of Bow Wow's career. Wait, that has to be where we're
Wow.
going here.
I did not consider that. Okay. This could be way bigger than we thought. No, how does Jade Cargill get involved?
I don't know. I mean, I do also want to say that those sunglasses that she was wearing backstage were phenomenal. I mean,
Mm.
not enough can be said about Jade as kind of that exactly the sort of star that you would want showing up at a non-wrestling media related scrum or whatever to stir the pot and make some noise. Yeah, I mean, I have no idea what sort of a match we could be going to here unless we have, I don't know, Bow Wow enlisting
Mark
the
Sterling.
services or teaming up with somebody else or whatever it might be. Oh, Bow Wow versus Mark Sterling. Okay,
I don't know.
yeah.
So something is brewing there, and we get to Jade Cargill with the baddies. They're talking to Renee. Red Velvet is returned, has returned, and the baddies are going to have a celebration next week in Indianapolis. Mark Sterling also shows up here, and he is here to give Kiera Hogan a contract, or at least some sort of a document to indicate that she has been fired from the baddies. So we're keeping Layla Gray, getting rid of Red Velvet.
Getting rid of Kiera Hogan. Red Velvet.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
That's right. Yeah,
Yep.
Kiera Hogan. So that's that. Up next, we've got the Elite versus the Death Triangle in match number 2 of our best of 7. The Kansas entrance is back and looks to be at least here to stay for the time being. Don Callis is on commentary. They also replay Penta and George Kittle's interaction from Monday, showing off some of that mainstream press for the Lucha Brothers here. Pac comes out wearing a face mask, and the announcers inform us that he suffered a broken nose on Wednesday. So I don't know if this was an angle or if it was legitimate, but it at least played into the match. Any thoughts, Bruce?
Yeah, I was having that exact same question, whether it was legit or not, but one way or the other, the Elite had to know that they were going to be at least somewhat booed, or at least having to play somewhat heel in this. So having that as a target for Pac, I thought was really, really good. A fortuitous bit of luck there.
So we should talk about this now, okay? Because the Elite came out here working full heel. And of course, this is Chicago. What was the reaction you were expecting them to receive, and do you think they were met with that reaction?
I was not expecting quite as vociferous a "F the Elite" chant as happened when they first came out, but neither was I expecting to actually hear FCM Punk chants in Chicago later on into this match as well. So this really seemed like just a classic, kind of getting back to the Shades of Grey Attitude Era type, kind of pick your poison type sort of mixed crowd reaction. Obviously, the Elite are working heel, and I think was smart to do that. The Dan Flashes outfits, all of the shimmying coming down, down the ramp, and everything like that. But the other thing is that all of the guys involved in this match are canny enough and savvy enough to adjust on the fly based on the crowd's temperature, and do spots or sequences that will play to whichever way the wind happens to be blowing in the stadium at that one time. So I mean, it was a hot crowd, right? In terms of both negative and positive reactions all over the place throughout. So before we even, or even if we want to touch the third rail question of the possibility of a return being teased here, I think even for right now, for the remainder of these next few matches, they've got a pretty hot hand, and I think they're going to try to squeeze as much as they can out of it, whether that's leaning into very extreme heel reactions in some towns, whether that is prompting all manner of online speculation on the basis of individual spots and gestures that we saw in this match. I think who knows exactly when this whole 7-match series was decided upon, but knowing that there might be a mixed reaction to the Elite in certain areas, I think they're going to milk it for all it's worth.
I did not hear the "F the Elite" chant maybe as loudly as maybe you it sounds like you did, but to me, like it I don't know if the Elite reaction was as anti Elite as much as I think was warranted in a match like this. And my biggest criticism of them deciding to go full heel for this match was that it took so much away from the match on Saturday and the internal struggle that Phoenix had in deciding to finally turn heel. Phoenix had to really kind of, struggle for weeks to decide to finally use that bell hammer. And I think that needed to be followed up here, with the Death Triangle being full on heels and the Elite being the baby faces. Instead, it was the Death Triangle as baby faces, and we'll get to maybe the match itself. But by the end of the match, I kind of felt like what happened on Saturday's narrative was kind of rendered useless. But we will talk about it as we go through the match here, because a lot happened in this match that was very interesting that we will spend a lot of time talking about. Kenny and Phoenix start things off. A Terminator dive is interrupted by a Phoenix cutter. Phoenix then delivers this crazy tornado to the pile below. There was one moment where there were some very audible CM Punk chants heard, and you can see Matt crotch chopping the audience in the area where they're being directed. And this is where I started to hear the fuck CM Punk chants, and the cameras actually decide to close up on fans chanting it. So this followed up from, of course, BTE, where you had some of that emphasis as well. At least the direction here on this show seemingly making a point to show that this audience was chanting "fuck CM Punk." Certainly interesting there. Nick holds Pac up for Matt to seemingly hit a buckshot lariat. Matt Jackson does the flip and then intentionally lands on his ass. A clear sort of mocking of CM Punk for his failed buckshot lariats in his matches against Hangman Page. Omega then bites Pac, bites him, of course, directly playing into, of course, the Ace Steel biting. Phoenix then takes the hot tags with Phoenix doing this sort of crazy multi-jump springboard Rana. Matt distracts Pac to allow Kenny to hit a V-trigger and a Snapdragon. The Elite then rip Pac's protective face mask off as they deliver a three-way super kick. Pac then escapes the one-winged angel as Kenny hoists him up into a fireman's carry as Kenny delivers the go to sleep to Pac, who kicks out at a 2 count. Big reaction. First of all the references to CM Punk and Ace Steel. What were your reactions as you were watching?
I mean, this ran entirely counter to the piece that Kenny, or that, printed interview. I think it was in Sports Illustrated. I'm sorry, I don't remember the interviewer off the top of my head.
Justin Barrasso.
Yes, thank you. Where Kenny was trying to just sort of, tamp it down and whatnot. Obviously, that was completely out the window, or that was a work there, because, this was just them shining the crowd on as much as possible. The second this started happening, I mean, he did the little, the GTS, kind of nighty night gesture, before going for the Terminator dive, even before actually pulling the GTS itself off. The second this starts happening, your Twitter timeline is just exploding with speculation about like, they've got to deliver Punk back now if they're, they can't promise something and not come through on it. I don't think that that's necessarily the case. Like, I don't think that there is inherently let's say an objective negative or a unilateral downside to playing around with this sort of stuff and, kind of confronting the elephant in the room through these, kind of in-match, in-ring gestures and nods and winks and everything. It's what everybody's thinking about to begin with anyway. We can sort of talk about whether or not the heel shtick did sort of blur or sideline the Death Triangle's move here, but it's what's on everyone's mind right now, and they're gonna play around with it as much as possible. They're in the belly of the beast in Chicago. You have this crowd that again seemed to be sort of fluctuating and moving back and forth from section to section, from sequence to sequence in the match. So I mean, are they playing with fire? I guess, yeah, maybe. But, I kind of feel like the sort of person, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure if there are people who have decided that they're out on AEW, now that Punk is seemingly persona non grata. But again, it's what everyone is thinking about. And if we're not going to be getting, as many people have said, if we're not getting like a kayfabe explanation from Commissioner Tony about why, CM Punk and the Elite were stripped of their respective titles, I feel like something like this is kind of necessary to sort of bridge that kind of open question within the AEW world of what was going on with all of that. And again, as you and John have said, everybody who's watching and would question, hey, isn't that CM Punk's move? Everybody knows what's going on there anyway. So having these sorts of winks and nods, I think, is at least, treating the audience with a modicum of intelligence there.
But how does doing this answer any of those questions? I think it only raises those questions back up when maybe interest was starting to die down. The problem, and let me finish the match first before we get into this. Okay, he does the go to sleep. There's a big reaction to it. It prompts some fuck CM Punk chants from this crowd. Matt Jackson at this point hits a low blow to Pac behind the ref's back. Matt then grabs the bell hammer, but Penta is behind him with his own bell hammer as he uses it on Matt, and Pac pins Matt. The Death Triangle is up 2-0 here. Both of them now cheating. So The action was stellar. The atmosphere was incredible. I have a feeling, Bruce, you and I are going to disagree on the content of this match because I hated it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think having the Bucks, first of all, play heel, I've kind of indicated my issues with that. It totally took away from, I think, Phoenix's, in particular, his narrative, and his character growth coming off of Saturday. But I think the CM Punk spots in particular, Tony Khan and AEW have worked so hard to ignore the issue, to step away from the issue, to convince the media to step away from the issue. Kenny Omega himself is encouraging the audience to step away from the issue. And in this match, you fan the flames again. You deliberately keep the issue in everybody's memory. And I think, yes, it is on everybody's mind, but I don't think addressing it in this way was what the audience is in any way satisfying for the audience. It only it makes the feud hotter, and it only makes people want to ask those questions that much more. And I think it takes away from the great job that guys like Mox and MJF have done to try to distance this company from that dark cloud. And it's unless Punk is coming back, and of course those are going to be the rumors are bigger now, or the suggestion and sort of the speculation is now bigger than ever that Punk is going to be returning, and he could very well. It seems so counter though to everything else that we've seen from this company up until this point.
I mean, again, we're getting into we're going through the looking glass here in terms of speculation and fantasy booking, but I mean, one possibility there is that situation has changed behind the scenes, right? That things were going in one direction and now they're going in another. Because I mean, I will definitely agree with you that this was clearly a concerted choice and an effort, and it does, you're exactly right, fly completely in the face of the way that Tony and others have been trying to adjust or control the flow of questions and discussion about one Phil Brooks in the aftermath of all of this. For whatever reason, and I can't imagine that any of this is the Bucks or Omega going off of script here. Like, this has to be being done with as much blessing from the big seat as there is. This has been decided upon as a way of attracting interest in the Elite's return, and the kind of the meta issues surrounding their absence and their return. I think I see your point, certainly about Death Triangle and how it sort of does them no favors, maybe in the short term. The fact that we sort of had, I thought there was something symbolic about the fact that it was Penta, right, who delivered the hammer blow this time, to sort of indicate that, okay, they are all on side with being willing to be underhanded here. It's not just Phoenix or whatever it is. They're all on board with this now. So
he was also distracting the ref on Saturday.
True.
He was kind of in on it.
True.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's early days here, right? We're only a couple of days away from from the match on Saturday. So I'm not really sure as to where we're going in terms of the question of Punk's return or not. Obviously, I just kind of want to say that it's a little bit too early to judge the efficacy of this. This is also of playing with this imagery. This is also something that could possibly shift and change over the remainder of the next matches. Like, this is kind of unprecedented, I think, in terms of this, this long of a sequence of matches in AEW. It's very striking. It's being dragged out for, a month and a half or 2 months or whatever it is. So I sort of have to think that there are going to be other chapters there. I don't mean to be doing a a Road Dogg, let it play out sort of caution here. But given how deliberate this was, at least in the short term, I have to think there's some logic to it, and they have to know, to a certain degree, have some sort of plan. At least for the next few weeks, I'm willing to give them a little bit of rope.
I'm at least curious about the babyface heel dynamic for the remainder of these matches, And yes, I know the Bucks always have sort of this obnoxious personality about them anyway that kind of makes them likable, despite the fact that they're doing heelish things. I mean, tonight though, I didn't get that sense at all, and in fact, it was Death Triangle that were the baby faces. Yeah, I'm just kind of not really I don't see the point of the CM Punk thing. Even if you're in Chicago, first of all, it was way more 50-50, if not if they did not mention the CM Punk stuff, or if they didn't reference CM Punk at all in any of the wrestling, I think you would have had a few chance. But beyond that, like they would have moved on and they would have earned this crowd's respect as baby faces because they were about to see a great match.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you could have carried the same narrative that you had on Saturday. And this felt like a total 180 and something that I feel like ultimately might be a bit more detrimental to this company trying to move away from it all.
I mean, it's one of those things that could just be changing like night to night. Like, again, I hate to be making Attitude Era callbacks here, but the Bret Austin crossing the border sort of thing. Whether or
What's
not
the payoff?
yeah, this is the question. Yeah, I mean, it makes, in terms of payoff, doesn't necessarily work out, but in terms of week to week, maybe it pops ratings. Not that that's the sort of thing that you necessarily want. That sort of short-term planning is necessarily where you want to be going. I get your point. Yeah.
Certainly the hottest topic, I would say, coming off of this show. And some of you guys will very much disagree with me or maybe agree with me. Leave a comment in whatever source that you are listening this to us in, and let us know, because I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of thoughts. We thought we were done with the issue. You think
Oh, no.
again, okay? We are back to talking about CM Punk and the Elite. Renee Paquette is on the ramp, and she announces that Thunder Rosa and AEW have reached a mutual agreement. They have forced Thunder Rosa to relinquish the title. At this point, Chicago cheers. Renee puts Thunder Rosa puts her over for being a great champion and for forfeiting the title for the benefit of AEW. And Renee then introduces your new AEW Women's Champion, Jamie Hayter. Excalibur later also informed us that Toni Storm's reign is also retroactively recognized as an official reign as well. Your thoughts on this, Bruce?
I mean, it's about time. It's been nearly 3 months to the day. I checked it out. It was August 24th. I think, actually, I believe I might have been on Rewind-A-Dynamite. I seem to remember speaking to you or John about the whole the Rosa segment backstage. I did think it was sort of notable that Renee did not state that Rosa would be back to challenge for the belt at some point. You maybe don't want to give that away right now, but it seemed like a very politic way of phrasing this to try to keep things smoothed over. Obviously, I think, certainly not as much as the CM Punk business, but I think a lot of people are sort of aware, of the backstage static with Britt and Rosa. So if this is one of those ones where you probably could just kind of sweep it under the rug and move along without it necessarily needing to be dredged back up. Don't need to be seeing any more sandbag jokes or sandbag references in matches moving forward.
I think it would be implied that whenever Rosa comes back, like she has some sort of claim, to challenging, because she never lost it. But yeah,
I think she does. I'm just not sure if she's coming back at this point, is my speculation. But
okay, interesting. Anyway, so Jamie Hayter is officially the AEW Women's Champion right now, and they introduce the match. The match we have in question here. Well, first of all, Jamie Hayter comes out, and also very interesting that Britt Baker kind of walks ahead of her, and Renee asks Jamie a question, but before Jamie can answer, Britt grabs the mic and speaks for her, says something about them never thinking it was an interim title anyway. So, Hayter is going along with all of this. She's not really showing any sign of annoyance from Britt yet, the way, Samoa Joe did with Wardlow, for instance. But they are clearly kind of hinting towards some sort of jealousy type of breakup between the two.
it's a good way of what they're doing is sequestering the crowd's reactions away. They're giving the crowd the opportunity to cheer for Jamie and boo Britt without there needing to be some sort of friction between them in the short term, so that whenever they do go to that, they've got time to play it out. I thought that was very, very smartly done there, with Britt taking the mic and Jamie being perfectly happy because Britt was putting her over. Lets the crowd just kind of boo Britt and cheer for Jamie.
Also, no Saraya on this show. No real kind of update on her either, but maybe on Rampage we'll hear from Saraya. The match tonight is Britt Baker teaming with Jamie Hayter taking on Ty Melo and Anna JAS taking on Willow Nightingale and Sky Blue in a three-way tag team match. The announcers spend some time sort of emphasizing and focusing on the Baker-Hayter relationship. They're kind of debating whether Baker actually gave Hayter a break or if Hayter was just her hired muscle. Everybody working really fast here in Sky Blue, I thought, got a great reaction with her Quesadora into a code blue. The hate breaker from Hayter is delivered into a stomp from Britt, giving Baker and Hayter the win. Your thoughts on the match, Bruce?
Yeah, I thought on the whole pretty decent. I think Blue is a really interesting project that they have in the works. I just mainlined a whole lot of dark and dark elevation yesterday, and so this is all very fresh in my mind here. And I think she's one of those cases where you are seeing a lot of kind of like steady. It's not the fastest, but it's steady improvement from her. I'm really glad that Willow's the very organic way that Willow Nightingale has caught on with the AEW audience has not necessarily been kind of put into that ROH box under the bed. We'll hold on to it until we actually need it, sort of thing. I feel like you've really got to play the hot hand that you have with her there. She has a very, very natural connection with the crowd, and because you had, two heel tag teams or nominally heel tag teams, including Hayter, along with the babyface team, it again allowed for that sort of dynamic or separation between Britt and Jamie to sort of be maintained. Each of them was allowed to work either face or heel, depending on this on what the situation called for, and the crowd could react accordingly.
What do you see for Willow? Do you see a role for her at Final Battle?
I mean, yeah, it looks like we're going with Mercedes and Athena, for the ROH women's title. And oh boy, I'm up for that. I'm not to do a whole plug for Dark here, but man, the dark, brutal Athena just murdering people on Dark has been wonderful. I'm very into that match. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if we would necessarily have her in the title picture, but certainly I think some sort of match with her, or possibly even if I do think that not now because she just had the match, but somewhere down the line, I do think she's a bit of a dark horse candidate to possibly take the title off of Jade at some point. I know there's a lot of talk about returning Statlander whenever she's healthy, being an option there. I think in a few months you might have Willow at that point if she continues to sort of get the spotlight on her, and the crowd keeps having this sort of a reaction with her because she really is. She's just one of those like we talk about it a lot, or you and John talk about it a lot in terms of, the difficult, nobody can book or build baby faces anymore. And she's just one of those really rare, completely natural, and immediately likable baby faces. And that's not common these days.
Up next, we've got Top Flight and FTR. They're in the back with Renee. Dax puts over Top Flight and says that he wants them to take over the tag team wrestling scene or division in the future, like FTR has in the present. Darius, though, challenges FTR for the ROH tag team titles on Rampage this Friday. So that is a match you'll be getting. Top Flight versus FTR this Friday on Rampage. The Acclaimed come out, and Max Caster delivers rap. He's got some lines recapping the results of Full Gear, including them taking credit for breaking up Swerve and Lee, and also Jay Lethal and Jarrett's nuts getting slapped. So Anthony Bowens grabs the microphone. He speaks, and I'm sensing like his confidence and his presence on the microphone really growing and really improving. For a long time it was just Caster sort of like being the guy with the voice. Bowens was the guy with the line at the end, but Bowens has just really kind of taken charge as sort of like the guy actually speaking on behalf of the team, and he sounds great here. He says sorry, you had something to say, Bruce?
Once again, I feel like I say this every time on one of these shows. Again, as one of the people who just watches all the damn dark matches, I've been very, very high on Bowens for a long time. He's always, when you see him being he does a lot of media and whatnot. He's been on the MLB network and things like that a couple of times, and he always comes across in media appearances as somebody who's very comfortable, very much able to sort of put himself and his story across, as well as all of the the promo and the plugs that they want to get in there as well. So the fact that he's now really being able to kind of smoothly get that confidence over in a very natural sounding way in ring promos bodes very, very well. I mean, obviously it's not the WWE where we don't have to break the tag team up right now or anything like that. But my point is that I think there's a really, really high upside in Anthony Bowens for years to come.
So Bowens is saying that his shoulder is feeling a lot better, and beyond that, Daddy Ass's fingers have healed. So Daddy Ass takes off the bandages. He's about to scissor the Acclaimed, but on the screen, Sanjay, Lethal, Singh, and Jeff Jarrett appear. Jarrett tells them to watch their back as a TNA sucks chant reverberates in the background. Obviously, they weren't watching in 2002, these people. The Acclaimed and Daddy Ass scissor to close the segment. So looks like we're getting Lethal and Jarrett versus the Acclaimed.
I guess I think I might have called in to say this a little while ago, but just I have no time for Jarrett as an in-ring presence at this point. Like, if you want him doing as a bit of a mouthpiece or something like that, and you know, I guess doing like an interference chair spot or a guitar spot at some point. I really, when we're talking about, we've just, I've just finished kind of talking up people like, Willow Nightingale and Anthony Bowens, and just like, oh God, you've got such a great, exciting core here that just needs to be nurtured and just needs TV time. And look, I get it. I understand that some people have nostalgia for Jeff Jarrett and for that era of TNA and whatnot. I am not one of those people, and so less is more when it comes to Jeff Jarrett and me. I'll just say that.
Feels like, the Acclaimed are kind of just filling time, I have to say, before like they take on maybe a real challenger for in the lead up to a pay-per-view defense, perhaps in a team like an FTR, I would say.
I think it's kind of the fact that presumably FTR, will be defending the IWGP belts at Wrestle Kingdom, sort
Right.
of means that they can't really get involved in
Mhm.
the AEW title picture in right now. So yeah, it kind of does leave the champs with, kind of oddball
Jay
title
Lethal and
defenses. Jay
Jeff
Lethal and Jeff
Jeff
Jarrett. Yeah,
Jarrett. Yeah.
yeah.
I'm sure there's going to be some interaction between Jarrett and Billy Gunn, as sort of like the two veterans somehow able to talk about whatever history. I don't even know if they've had any history like
Well, they
in
share
ring.
Brian James in common, I guess. So there's that.
You're right. Okay. Yeah. I wonder if we get probably no involvement from BG there, but I'm at least somewhat curious to see like how they will try to make Jeff Jarrett compelling in this feud. I'm guessing we're going to get, I don't know, some sort of a war between slapping nuts or scissoring as the de facto act of the day.
I don't know if just the wonderful reception that gerontological man called Sting has received has maybe just gone to Tony Khan's head in terms of reclaiming old WCW non WWE legends and giving them one last run here. But
Would
anyway.
you Would you rather slap nuts or scissor? Let us know in the comment section below. Rampage at a 4 o'clock start time on Friday, a very special start time. That's even earlier for you, Bruce. That's 1 p.m., isn't it,
Yeah,
on the West Coast?
and Friday is I'm not actually at work on Friday, so I'll be just probably like having my lunch or something like that, and sitting down with Rampage at a very civil hour, and then I'll have my Friday night ahead of me as well. Lovely.
4 p.m. Eastern time for Rampage on Friday. And on the card, we've got Anthony Henry taking on Darby Allin. We've got FTR versus Top Flight. Chris Jericho will be speaking. Hikaru Shida will be in action. Also announced Butcher and the Blade and Roosh take on the Dark Order. So just on that note, Rewind a SmackDown that evening with me and John will be on at 10 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll be going live right after SmackDown, of course, because we'll have already seen Rampage. Next week on Dynamite, they have announced Death Triangle versus the Elite match number 3, also the return of MJF. And then we have our main event of the evening for the Ring of Honor World Heavyweight Championship. Tomohiro Ishii takes on Chris Jericho. The little promo that Jericho cut on Saturday, of course, indicated prior history between the two with when Ishii was but a young boy for Lionheart Chris Jericho back in WAR. Jericho starts the match off yelling Baka, and they start off with a slap fest. Clearly, Ishii not one to be called Baka. More stiff slaps and chops, and then Bruce, they went through an entire picture-in-picture with a chop exchange that was about the damnedest thing I've ever seen, because Jericho's chest starts being split open, and then like in this tiny picture in the corner you see a man with just like blood, and I don't know about you, but like usually when I'm like the picture in picture is on, I'm not really paying attention, like I'm too distracted by the commercials. I was glued to my screen trying to squint, trying to look at, whoa, how did this guy like bleed this much?
This went from, the kind of the usual, kind of Ishii chop exchange that you will get in, pretty much any singles match that Ishii is in. This went from that to like, you know, a friggin' homage to the Kobashi Sasaki, 2005 Noah match in picture. And, I was kind of, I've got multiple windows open on my computer and I'm squinting. And it's like, no, yeah, that is just a big, big, big patch of blood beginning to open up on Jericho's chest. Both guys looking like, raw hamburger by the time we get back from the commercial. It is just, before we go on with the rest of the match, the whole, Jericho calling him Kohei and everything like that was just, I mean, it's great that it's actually, true and legit. It is just so bizarre to think of Ishii as being a young boy to anybody, let alone somebody, wrestling in a main event mix. Like Ishii's like, this is a weird comparison way, but to me, he's like Tom Waits in that you just have to assume that he has looked and he has acted like he was in his mid 40s since he was 10 years old. I just cannot imagine, like
You can't
it's
imagine this handsome young lad
it just I
getting
can't.
your chonko for you.
Oh, geez. Yeah, no, I actually did some digging on this. I was curious if they ever, I mean, obviously I knew that he was in war training, but it was 3 months after Jericho had left the promotion that Ishii had his first match in war.
That
So
checks
on
out.
Yeah, so did the cage match digging here on November 2nd in 1996. Ishii lost his debut match to Battle Ranger, and on the same night, Jericho was in the middle of a set of 3 house show matches where he was unsuccessfully challenging Dean Malenko for the cruiserweight title. So there you go, ships in the night there.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah, so they go about this entire chop exchange in the picture in picture. Ishii's hand is dripping with blood. Like it's insane. I don't know what commercials were airing, but like it would be hilarious if it was like, I don't know, burger commercial or
Nick
Sonic.
Gage pizza, and then we
Yeah,
get
exactly. Finally, some clotheslines in the corner allowed Jericho to regain control. He goes for the 10 punches in the corner, but Ishii counters with a running powerbomb. Jericho then spikes Ishii head first on the apron with a DDT. Jericho hits some repeated Germans. Ishii no-sells the first 2. He hits a third as Ishii again tries to no-sell but stumbles partway through and ultimately collapses. Jericho hits a lion salt, but Ishii kicks out at 1. Jericho hits a code breaker, and Ishii kicks out at 2. Ishii then blocks the Judas effect, hits a headbutt and a sliding lariat for 2. Ishii then escapes the walls, and Tomohiro Ishii hits the code breaker before a lariat and a 2 count. Jericho blocks an enziguri before locking in the walls of Jericho again. At this point, Ishii flips over, but Jericho transitions into the lion tamer. Ishii does not give up right away. In fact, in his last act of defiance, he takes his hand and flips the bird at Chris Jericho, flipping him off as he taps with his middle finger. I did not expect this match, Bruce, to close off this edition of Dynamite.
No. I to be honest, yeah, I was kind of, in terms of sequencing, I almost feel like to get back to the CM Punk point, I kind of feel like there was a conscious attempt to keep the Punk and Elite business completely separate from MJF and Moxley as much as possible. But part of me was sort of expecting this match to start Dynamite. Oh, it's going to be hard hitting, and that's the way they often like to start these. The fact that this was given the main event spot, and again, a match this brutal that just dug into again, the most like hard-hitting styles of Japanese pro wrestling. I want to just kind of bookmark this one for the next time somebody brings out the whole like AEW, it's just basically like WWE at this point, too much sports entertainment, etc. I just want to refer back to the fact that we saw Tomohiro Ishii have this match in the main event of a primetime episode of American wrestling television in 2022, because look, I'm a long time Ishii fan. He almost single-handedly was the reason I first really fell in with New Japan Wrestling years and years ago. On the one hand, you can sort of say that, oh, Ishii's moveset is so limited, and he always has the quote same match. I think that this match completely puts the lie to that and shows that that's absolutely not the case. But this was a fantastic match, and it had so much of it just relied, like, yes, there were brutal moves. Yes, that spike DDT to the apron was hideous to see. It had all of the kind of the violence and intensity, but so much of this was just character work of both of them, right? Of Jericho realizing that he was ultimately going to lose this chop battle, right? That Ishii just, that he'd need to rely on, kicks and, more, his more North American, style offense, that he couldn't hang with Ishii in his own game if he wanted to beat him. There was just so much going on here. The little homages to one another's moves, Jericho hitting sliding lariats and things like that. Yeah, just a fan frigging tastic match. Can't say enough good things about this.
I guess I can understand some people maybe criticizing Ishii for not being as I don't know, versatile as some other wrestlers, but to me, like, I never want anything else
No,
than
no.
from Tomohiro Ishii than a Tomohiro Ishii match. And for me, the versatility comes not from necessarily him, but from seeing his opponent and how his opponent can keep up from such a physically demanding style of professional wrestling match. And that's what made me so interested to see what 52-year-old Chris Jericho could do with a style as taxing as Tomohiro Ishii's.
Yeah.
And God, like, does this man continue to impress? Like, with how willing he's able to step out of his comfort zone. I don't even know if Chris Jericho has a comfort zone. The man is constantly challenging himself, doing something different and fresh, all into his 50s.
My friends and I, when we were watching Full Gear, we're sort of coming around to this point and sort of saying, like, okay, look, by whichever measures do you want to sort of say talk about in terms of the greatest wrestlers, in terms of draws, mic work, or in ring, best volume of in ring matches, and we can sort of say that, okay, Jericho isn't necessarily the best one in any one of those categories, but in terms of ability to change and adjust and have that, I know he's more of an Iron Maiden fan, but have that Bowie-like ability to sort of, be a chameleon and adapt and change to whichever way the wind is blowing. There are so many cases where certain wrestlers seem out of step with the time in which they are being pushed, right? Like, so much has been made of, say, Hulk Hogan just kind of not really fitting in with Hall and Nash, or not understanding the same references, and he just kind of looking like the awkward dad there hanging around with him. Jericho, whatever we want to say about, personal life, or, personal politics or whatever like that, he never feels like he's out of step, or uncomfortable, or not entirely at home with wherever the pro wrestling business is at, when he's in it. And, I don't, he doesn't kind of overstep or kind of get into types of matches or types of feuds that will not play to his strengths. He's very good at not exposing himself. To get back to this match in particular, this was a match where I was not expecting him to be able to just physically go as much as he did, with Ishii here, and he absolutely did. So yeah, 100% have to take my hat off to him.
It was my match of the night, Bruce. Ahead of the Elite versus Death
Yep,
Triangle,
same.
and I wonder if others will agree. But I thought it was, like, very inventive what they did through the commercial break, and just kind of using that chop fest as a real centerpiece. Whether or not, like, that blood was intentional, I mean, I give them credit either way. It was either really well worked, or just a very fortunate fact that you had such a brilliant visual to attach to my memory of this excellent match. So a great one night popping from Tomohiro Ishii. See you in another 6 months, I guess,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
we welcome it. So that was tonight's edition of AEW Dynamite. Your thoughts overall, Bruce?
Oh, and then I don't know if you want to just mention the Castagnoli spot at the end.
Oh, yes, of course. Claudio Castagnoli steps up to, I guess, seemingly protect the announcers from Chris Jericho, and slapped him or attacked him.
He was going after Ian Riccaboni, right? He's been, threatening Ian and everything like that. So Jericho was going after him, and then Claudio runs in to knock Jericho down, and obviously set up his challenge for the ROH belt at Final Battle in a couple of weeks.
Mhm. All right, so that is what your thoughts overall on Dynamite?
There was a lot of, again, like I was sort of saying with regards to Full Gear, I was pretty excited and happy about that show, coming off of kind of not a bad build, but, a lukewarm sort of build. And so the fact that that card delivered, and then you had a bunch of questions about MJF, and obviously that's been specifically forestalled. Um, or pushed forward, for at least the next week. They had a lot to play with there. And then, I think built around two very, very good, very different matches. This was a really, really excellent show. On paper it looked good, but I think it over delivered, very much like Full Gear did.
I really enjoyed the opening segment, even without having MJF here. I mean, that almost kind of like, in a way, helped things because we got to see like the Blackpool Combat
Yes.
Club's own sort of internal, I don't know, struggle with losing their parent. Basically, dad has left the family, and it was kind of nice to have that sort of like nice internal focus just on Mox and Brian and Regal. So I really enjoyed that. I really loved the main event. I have very mixed feelings about the Death Triangle versus the Elite, and that's a match I absolutely loved on Saturday. But it certainly got people talking, and I'm very curious to hear people's responses. And the rest of the card I thought was perfectly satisfying. So overall, like when you bookend the show as strongly as you did with some good stuff in between, thumbs up show for me. Let's go to your feedback here. We have actually a super chat. First of all, let me just get the little feedback graphic up. All right. Super chat comes to us from Rob McDonald, who sends $5. He says, Penta using the bell hammer tells me that the Death Triangle will definitively be heel going forward. This is a one night only turn, much like Moxley on Saturday. I would have said, first of all, thank you so much for the support, Rob. I would have said the definitive turn was Saturday. Like there was nothing mixed to me about it. Like to me, the only holdout was Phoenix by that point.
I guess the thing for me with the Phoenix thing was that it felt, I don't know. Maybe this is just a question of subtlety, or a subtlety in a heel turn that we don't normally get to see. I think it was John, in your guys' discussion of it, who sort of pointed out that you can sort of see Phoenix struggling to escape the one-winged angel, right? And when he realizes that no, he's not going to be able to wriggle out of this, and this is the most protected move in pro wrestling, and he had no other exit. That's when he elected to do that. Now, whether that constitutes a heel turn in the traditional, understanding of pro wrestling, or whether that just constitutes somebody cutting corners in order to win, the way that, Taz or whoever of your heel commentators would sort of put it. We could get into a how many heads, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin type metaphysical question about that. But I thought that it made for a slightly more, I don't know, more nuanced or more natural sort of move for, sweet young Ray Phoenix to make. And then when you have, all of the heavy, heel shtick with the Elite, you have Cutler goofily running around with the cold spray, and you've even got Nakazawa out there, I think, and Callis is lamping it up on commentary. The whole sort of, fighting fire with fire thing. Lets them kind of play around a little bit with that, I think.
See, because they spent so much time with Phoenix sort of in struggle, deciding not to use the Bellhammer, telling Pac that we can't do this sort of thing. To me, like the moment he finally did it was definitive, because it all kind of made using the Bellhammer like this bridge that once you cross, you can't go back the other way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how I read it. Rob also continues saying that this was a one night only turn, much like Moxley on Saturday. And maybe we go back to discussing, like, did the Elite need to preemptively turn themselves heel but to combat the Chicago response? I would maintain they did not, because at best I thought the reaction was mixed, and I think if the content of the match ended up being strong, they would have been able to make this crowd completely forget about CM Punk.
I see what you mean, but I kind of feel like they just, in taking the bull by the horns, they were sort of, it's kind, I don't know, I'm sure there's some sort of analogy to be made with, like, improv theater or something like that, in that, they were sort of anticipating the crowd giving them this energy. So okay, here's what we're doing, here's what we're projecting forward, how are you going to respond to that? And we ended up with a pretty mixed and fluid reaction. Whether that means that they should have stuck more with, the kind of the presentation of the Elite that they were on Saturday, I don't know. But again, I kind of feel like it gives them, I don't know, it just gives them flexibility while all of this is being sussed out. And again, to go back to what I was saying earlier, the fact that this is a 7-match series, like this isn't the blow off, this isn't, oh, now I don't know, Death Triangle are gonna like use hammers to beat the Dark Order or some other, poor underling babyface trio or anything like that. Because the story is ongoing, this feud must continue. I think there's enough chance for, or enough time for, these slightly more, back and forth, shades of gray, yada yada, type sort of moves to be made in the short term.
Let's go to forum.postwrestling.com for some feedback from our patrons. We start off with Muggin, who says, I had anticipated that Chicago would get real icy for the Elite. They did. Not only that, they didn't shy away from the all-out debacle, and Kenny hitting the GTS takes a great deal of balls. The aftermath of Full Gear was solid. I thought Moxley would have been gone fishing by now. The trios match stole it, and Jericho's plans for Final Battle took shape. Dope match versus Ishii. And Megan says, let Jamie Hayter speak. So maybe that's sort of the carrot that they're going to be dangling now. First it was like, get Jamie Hayter the championship. They've done that. Now the carrot that they're dangling is letting her speak on the microphone, perhaps.
Yeah, step out of Brit's shadow. Exactly. Yeah, if you want her to be the, the actual, kind of fighting champ of the division for the next little while. Do you want me to go to the next one?
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, we are going to Brandon from New Jersey. Well, I'm glad you asked. I thought it was a solid episode. Oh, by the way, good evening, your lordship and way. Good episode from Jericho's exploding pec to the women's match, which was really good. My question to you and Brewdog is this, will the Bucks be able to come back to Down on the Road? Will it be the biggest choke job ever by Lucha Underground Bros? I'm guessing they're angling it as very sports-like, with the Bucks being down 2-0 in a series. Down 2-0. Oh yeah. I mean, I think this is, whatever, insert, Brandon, with his encyclopedic sports knowledge, would be able to, cite chapter and verse, I'm sure, dozens and dozens of cases of people coming back from a 2-0 loss in a best of 7 series. Hell, Boston and New York in the, what was it, 2004 ALCS?
We got to build the best of 7 like it's a wrestling match, right? Like have one sort of like clear dominant force, have the other team come back, and then building towards sort of a climactic finish. If you're going to go all 7, of course. Mm-hmm. Do you wish to continue with Brandon's feedback,
Sure. He's got some meanderings of a man. This is the annual night where people go out and revel. This was also the annual night that myself and my siblings went out, and my sister and sisters-in-law started a line brawl due to the fact that another woman was trying to creep up on my sister's husband. I hid under a table. Am I a coward? Entirely depends, Brandon, on the scope and size and breadth of a bar brawl. In my experience, once they kind of get going, they get very chaotic. They're a maelstrom that draws everybody in. It becomes impossible to actually get your hands on the person that you are trying to get your hands on. And so if you don't have a clear line of sight on a viable target, sure, protecting your own ass and hiding under the table, I'll let you get away with that. You haven't lost any esteem in my eyes.
Only in the Post Wrestling Cafe can, an esteemed scholar, a professor in Bruce Lord, be asked to give that level of brain power to aimless meandering from Brandon from New Jersey. That is what we offer here at the Post Wrestling Cafe. So thank you so much, Bruce, for that. And thank you, Brandon, of course. We got a Jay from Windsor who says, good show, but I think it's going to be overshadowed by a single move. Given what Omega said earlier today about fans letting it go, then doing the GTS in Punk's hometown, do you think this screams Angle? Or is Kenny just being a jackass? That is the big question. I mean, so here's the thing. Like, I believe a lot of the reports of the locker room not wanting CM Punk back. I can also believe that Tony Khan really wants CM Punk back, and that whenever he heals from his injury and all this blows over, hopefully he can look at it again, because the man means that much for their overall business. So where's Tony Khan's head at? Is he going to risk upsetting the locker room by bringing this person back? In either case, I don't necessarily know if what we saw tonight was directly leading to a Punk return, because he's seemingly pretty far, with the injury from coming back. So I don't know, would doing it today have any sort of lasting effect on something that's not scheduled to happen for quite a while?
I mean, the fact that there is that delay almost lets them get away with this, right? Like, they could continue to do this through this whole best of 7 series until, they decide to stop doing it, or it stops getting a reaction, and then just let it go. And then whether Punk returns to AEW, shows up in WWE, never shows up in a wrestling ring again, there's no immediate consequence for that. So, there's maybe something to that, I think.
Thank you so much, Jay from Windsor. Let's go up next to Cody from Maine.
Yeah, Cody says an enjoyable and eventful evening edition from the fantastic setup for House of Black's return, conditioning the audience to expect evil Danhausen. Yes, I was assuming the same. I was assuming that Danhausen had cursed QT Marshall's microphone. I thought that's where we were going.
So there's the feud: evil Danhausen in the House of Black.
Yeah. Who's truly more evil? I mean, knowing what I know about them, I do have to, Danhausen has a little bit more goth cred in terms of his record collection. I can say that.
Really?
Yeah, Malachi Black, he's a bit more of a metalhead
Is he
sort
a
of guy.
poser?
No, he's certainly not.
Him?
No. Oh Jesus, no. That man isn't a poser of anything. But he's a little bit more of a metalhead, I think, is the issue there. But which is its own flavor of evil. But no. This is a whole other. I have a dream podcast in my head where myself and Kate and possibly my friend Alex just actually rate the goth credibility, like the shoot goth credibility of wrestlers. Right? There are a lot of, I'm not gonna lie, a lot of poser goths in wrestling. It's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Really? Wow.
It is. Okay. Not going to put any names on blast, Kevin Thorne. Anyway.
Sorry, I missed that.
Kevin Thorne, but never
Kevin
mind.
Thorne, okay. Yeah, can you work if you're gonna have a goth character in wrestling, okay? You better have the record collection to back it up, because you have people like Kate, people like Bruce that are willing to sleuth it out. I mean, is Sting on this list?
Sting is the really supportive dad who does the dress up as your kid day at work and sort of just shows up and is just like, yeah, hey son, sure, let's listen to some AFI records together, and you're like, that's nice, Dad, but it's
so if Kevin Thorne is on the bottom, who's at the very top of this list? At least today?
I should give a quick little shout out to AEW Dark one-time wrestler and kind of friend of my podcast, Trevor Aon. He's completely legit. You've got him. Who else? Like I said, Danhausen has kind of intimated here and there that he's sort of that he knows what's up. God, now I'm trying to remember who else. I do have a short list in my head. This will maybe show up on post
next. If you ever get to do a podcast with Kate, I would absolutely love to hear this.
Yeah. But yeah, shout out to Trevor Aon. Going back to Cody's actual feedback here, to Shawn Spears getting his witch and the interim tag being dropped from the Women's Championship. Yes. The trios match may go down in history with the likes of Shawn Michaels' infamous segment in Montreal back in 2005. There's leaning into the reaction you're going to get. Then there's what we got tonight. Safe to say there's no end in sight to CM Punk talk. And what else can I say about Chris Jericho? I feel like I've praised him in my feedback every week. For my money, 2022 has been the best of his career in terms of in-ring work. Absolutely incredible. I mean, I don't know. We might have to go back to the Lionheart and Super Jacob days, but certainly, given his age, given what people expect of somebody at this point in their career, there's no question that when we just get to pure in-ring work, Jericho is still massively, massively over delivering.
Yeah, I think in terms of variety, in terms of I think what he offers to the company overall, I would probably name this year. I'm also thinking back to the Jericho or the Shawn feud, of course, but. He really does continue to excite me, at least in ring here. The aforementioned Kate from Montreal speaks up, and I don't think she's got a list, but she does say that it is interesting to see the Elite leaning into the reaction they knew was coming, and I think having them go 0-2 actually works better in story than having them tie it up, because it means they'll fight as underdogs in other cities where they'll be perceived as baby faces. Damn, they laid it on thick, though. I'm glad to see the House of Black return, and I hope they'll just let them kill everyone until they get to pick the bones of the winners of the best of 7. I swear it looked like Ishii's hand was swollen by the end of the match, which I guess shouldn't be all that surprising.
I feel like somebody pointed this out at some point, that one of Ishii's hands is sometimes regularly quite a little bit, swollen, whether that's the result of chopping or whatever it might be. But yeah, no, obviously a really strong return for the House of Black, and I agree. I think that whatever whichever team emerges out of the best of 7 will be definitely worn down, but we'll have a clearer sense of sort of what their presentation is and how the House of Black might be targeting them. We go on to H. De La Cruz 24, who says, thoughts on the Death Triangle winning twice while cheating? Is that really the only way the Elite can be beat? Bad look or just me overthinking things? Foolish to think that they would work in these spots without a payoff in the future when CM Punk is healed. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about that
Mhm.
second point. I think a good deal. Um, I think there's something to that. I think that, yeah, I would hope that if we are, certainly, going the distance here, a clean win for Death Triangle somewhere down the line might do them a world of good if they are going to be kept somewhat face-ish or face adjacent coming out of this. You have to imagine, I mean, this is one of those cases where if we're going the full 7, we're going to have, probably end up being close to 2 hours of ring time, between all of these teams. This has to be one of those sort of kind of mutual respect positions at the end. I would imagine, and so yeah, I that's a good point. I do think that if we are going the distance, a clean win for Death Triangle would be a good gesture to have.
Yeah, today I kind of get this, and even on Saturday I get the get well, maybe Saturday more so than today, but today I get the less of a sense that they're trying to really protect anybody, and it was more so maybe playing up the finish from Saturday, why you had so much Bellhammer use. I think going forward though, you do have the excuse of the wear and tear on these guys' bodies, and so at that point, taking a quote unquote clean pinfall wouldn't be such a big deal. You can argue that there are no more clean pinfalls because they'll all be so worn down
Hmm.
towards the end. So I think that'll happen later. Let's go to Jordan from the Bronx, who says there's so much to be said about the frequency of AEW's visits to Chicago, but it's immediately justified when you get hot crowds like that each time. The trios match was petty and childish, but I had so much fun watching it. There's there's money waiting to be made if CM Punk ever returns and is willing to do business. If not, the Elite positioning themselves as asshole heels in Chicago, like Shawn Michaels being a heel in Canada, is a stroke of brilliance. The interim tag is removed from the women's division, and the announcement of, by the way, Tony Storm's reign is recognized after watching Britt get the pin was lackluster. I was a bit, well, I mean, at that point, like, they didn't even have to do that. Like, I just feel like they did it
It was just a
to
nice
appease
little
the
make
crowd.
good, so that so that there isn't this asterisk on Tony when she when she gets another shot at the title or something like that. And if there was question about whether or not Rosa would be able to return anytime soon until the last week or so of Tony's reign, I feel it's the right thing to do.
Jordan continues, I was a bit thrown off by the opening promo. Is Regal potentially walking all the way to Orlando or Stanford? That's something that my watch group started to speculate. Just felt anticlimactic after Moxley had all of the anger and Danielson was begging him off. MJF not being there due to his other commitments didn't help. I'm sure he's going to cut a hell of a promo next week and get some clarity on things. Overall, an excellent follow-up episode as there seems to be firm directions going forward to close out the year.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand, why other people are sort of wondering that that might literally have been Regal's last, last moment on there. And if it is, that does sort of explain why the focus had to be very quickly pivoted on kind of interscene Blackpool Combat Club conflict, rather than on beating up Regal in order to get to MJF. But oh yeah, yeah, I did like the kind of Regal sort of like big timing MJF by, oh yeah, no, he's off in Hollywood shooting a movie. Unlike, he's not going to show up in this town with you plebs. Come on, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's only, I mean, Chicago, one of
Third
the
or fourth
biggest.
largest markets in
Yeah.
the continent. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you all you guys for all your excellent feedback, and thank you, Bruce Lord, for joining me. Fantastic as always on these
Oh,
shows, and as I'm sure I echoed the audience's sentiment. Where can people hear a lot more from you?
oh, okay, sure, yeah. I think, as some people know, I run a monthly podcast at Post Wrestling. The Postmarks, the most recent episode involving the aforementioned Kate from Montreal, is up on postwrestlingcafe.com. That's free for everyone, not just Patreon members. My podcast partner, David Myers, and myself spoke with Kate and had a much more free form conversation than we sometimes do on those. It got into topics of writing, acting, all sorts of literature and interests unrelated, or at least partially related, to wrestling. I think folks who are used to hearing Kate on, a lot of the Friday night episodes here at Post will end up learning a lot about her through that. In addition to that, I recently had an article up on Post itself that I was pretty happy with, called Better Than the Best, MJF and the Shadow of CM Punk. This was an article that was taking a look at the history of MJF's feud with Punk and how MJF has sort of pivoted and reacted after Punk's disappearance. But what I'm guessing Way is maybe referring to is my main hustle outside of wrestling, which is idieudie.com. That's a website where my friend Alex and I write about and discuss goth music, industrial music, EBM, and darkwave. That's also the home of the We Have a Technical podcast, which we run weekly. We will have our interview with Sean Brennan of legendary goth act London After Midnight up on tomorrow's episode. If you want to follow me on Twitter until the platform collapses, I'm there at Contrasoma. That's also the username for me on Grapple, on Untapped, and on Last.fm. If you want to check my own goth cred and see what I've been listening to or what beer I've been drinking, that's all there on Contrasoma.
Never question this man's record collection. All right, Bruce Lord, you're the lordship himself. Thank you so much for joining us. I am at Way0937. As I mentioned on the Post Wrestling Cafe feed for all patrons, John Pollock will be releasing an audio road diary from our trip to Newark. That'll be out tomorrow. He will be joining me also in the Post Wrestling Cafe and also video.postwrestling.com back on Friday, 10 p.m. Eastern time for an earlier edition of Rewind a SmackDown. And until then, I will talk to all of you guys later.